Working the late-night shift at Taco Bell isn't glamorous, but it pays the bills while I'm in college. Most nights it's pretty dead, just the occasional drunk looking for a fourth meal to soak up their booze. But every once in a while, we get someone truly bizarre coming through the drive-thru, like that girl last week asking me to read her tarot cards. So when a beat-up van pulled up blasting death metal at 1 a.m., I didn't think much of it. I grabbed the mic to take their order, expecting slurred speech and stifled laughter. But all I heard was heavy breathing coming through the speaker. "Hello, can I take your order?" I asked, wondering if they were just messing around. The harsh breathing continued. Unease started creeping up my spine. "Hello," I tried again. "If you could please order something or move along so I can help the next customer." More silence followed by what sounded like pained wheezing. Okay, this was getting creepy. I leaned out the drive-thru window to get a look at the driver, but the van's windows were heavily tinted. I could just barely make out the outline of a large figure in the driver's seat. "Sir, if you don't order something, I'm going to have to ask you to leave," I said firmly, trying to keep the shake out of my voice. In response, the wheezing turned into a guttural laugh that froze my blood. Before I could hit the panic button, the van squealed away into the night, leaving me breathless with fear. I told myself it was just some kids messing around, but I couldn't deny the primal terror I felt in that moment. The rest of my shift passed in unsettled silence. I didn't think much more about the incident until a few nights later, when a low rumbling lulled me from my textbook. I glanced out the window, and my heart seized. That same van was crawling through the parking lot. I instinctively knew, the way prey knows a predator is near, that whoever was driving it meant me harm. Frantically, I look around for a weapon or an escape route, but we were tucked away in an isolated corner of the lot far from the safety of the restaurant. I was trapped. The van rolled closer until it was only a few feet from my booth window, its engine growling eagerly like a stalking beast. And then it stopped, idling right outside like it was watching me. My breaths came in panicked gulps now. Gripping my math book, I landed a solid blow against the glass, hoping to startle it away. But the van didn't even flinch, that guttural laughter drifting out again. It knew I was cornered. With trembling hands, I called my manager, begging her to call the cops, to do anything to get this predator away from me. When she finally came rushing out the back door, the van peeled away into the darkness again. We reviewed security footage, but the license plate was obscured. The police took my statement, but with no evidence of a direct threat. Their hands were tied. The next week crawled by in paranoid tension. I refused to work the drive-thru window anymore, convinced the van would be waiting for me again. My manager said they would relocate our booth away from the isolated lot edge, but construction stalled the plans. I dreaded each night shift, praying I wouldn't hear that now familiar rumbling engine. It was 3 a.m. when my nightmare returned. I was cleaning up in the deserted dining room, trying to stay near the safety of co-workers. But closing time came, and soon the others filtered out until I was alone again. As I wiped down the last table, the front door suddenly swung open. I looked up, and there he was, a giant of a man, his face obscured by a grotesque mask, lumbering toward me with terrible purpose. Terror seized me. I knew with chilling certainty that if he grabbed me, I would never escape. Adrenaline flooded my muscles, and I bolted for the back exit. Behind me, his heavy footsteps pursued me with frightening speed. I crashed through the door and into the alley, running for my life through the cold darkness. I could hear him gaining on me, his raspy breaths drawing closer. I screamed for help, but the empty streets swallowed my voice. When I felt his massive hand clamp down on my shoulder, I knew I was dead. But as he jerked me back into his crushing grip, blue and red lights suddenly flashed to life, illuminating the alley. A police cruiser came screeching up, officers spilling out with guns drawn. The man released me, and I collapsed sobbing to the pavement. They ordered him to freeze, but he charged forward like a freight train. They unloaded tasers and bullets alike into his massive frame until he finally crumpled and lay still. I later learned they had been staking out the Taco Bell, hoping to catch my stalker. When I didn't come out with the others, they knew he had found me. The man turned out to be an escapee from a nearby psychiatric hospital with a history of obsession and violence. As they cuffed his unconscious body, all I could do was watch in numb shock and relief. The thought of those massive hands wrapped around me still haunts my dreams. What nightmarish fate had awaited me if the police hadn't arrived when they did? I put in my notice at Taco Bell the next day. My managers understood, even giving me paid leave for the rest of the week. I jumped at a clerical job on campus instead, grateful for the safety of fluorescent-lit hallways and security badges. I still can't drive past a Taco Bell at night without breaking into a cold sweat, remembering the rumbling van that stalked me relentlessly. In the rearview mirror, I imagine seeing that masked figure emerging from the shadows. And I wonder how many other unwitting victims over the years fell prey to his twisted obsession within those tainted halls. All I know is, I will never again take for granted the simple luxury of feeling safe, because that comfort was shattered for me in what should have been just another mundane late-night fast food shift. Some horrors can only be understood once you've stared them in the face. Unable to hide or flee their pursuit, I narrowly escaped mine, but the scars it left will never fully heal. It was just another typical Monday night shift at Taco Bell. I had been working the closing shift for a few months now to earn some extra cash while I was in college. The work was easy enough, taking orders, manning the drive-through window, wiping down tables. Nothing I couldn't handle, but there was one coworker of mine who always gave me the creeps. Greg had been working at Taco Bell even longer than the manager. He was quiet, kept to himself mostly, but there was something in his eyes that always disturbed me. They were cold, empty. He always had this strange little smile on his face, like he knew some twisted secret. The way he looked at customers, especially female customers, made my skin crawl. One night, as we were closing up shop around 11 p.m., it was just Greg and I. I was nervous being alone there with him, but tried to shake it off. As I was taking out the trash, I heard the door to the freezer swing open behind me. Greg's scrawny silhouette emerged, steaming rising around him from the cold air. "Hey kid, come here a sec, will ya?" he said. His voice was low and slick. Every nerve in my body screamed at me to run, but I froze. "I want to show you something," he uttered through his grin. I hesitantly stepped forward, my pulse racing. Greg grabbed my arm forcefully and pulled me into the freezer with him. The heavy metal door slammed behind us, enveloping us in total darkness. I could feel his hot breath on the back of my neck as he leaned in close. "I've been watching you. You think you're better than the rest of us, don't you?" His grip on my arm tightened, his long, dirty fingernails digging into my skin. I tried to struggle free, but he was too strong. The terror rose in my throat like bile. Greg let out a soft chuckle. "Oh, we're going to have fun tonight." Suddenly, the freezer lights flickered on, revealing the horror surrounding me. The floor was splattered with blood. Mutilated body parts of past victims hung from meat hooks on the walls. I opened my mouth to scream, but no sound came out. Greg clasped his hand over my face, his putrid smell filling my nostrils. "Don't worry, I'll make it quick." I even grabbed us a fresh one today. He gestured to the corner where a girl's lifeless body lay. She couldn't have been more than 16. Her stomach was sliced open, intestines spilling out onto the icy floor. I thrashed violently, willing myself to wake up from this hellish nightmare. Greg just giggled maniacally, producing a gleaming butcher knife from his apron pocket. "Let's get started, shall we?" Just as he raised the blade to my throat, the freezer door flew open. Blinding light flooded the small space.
"Police!"
"Freeze," a voice bellowed. Within seconds, Greg was tackled to the ground, the knife clattering across the concrete. As the cops wrenched his arms behind his back, his eyes met mine one last time. That twisted grin still stretched across his gaunt face. "I'll see you again, real soon," hissed through bared teeth. The police had been tracking a serial killer in our town for months, always one step behind him, until they tapped the Taco Bell phone lines and overheard Greg's plans for me that night. I was his youngest victim yet, at only 19. The cops said they arrived just in time, mere seconds before Greg would slit my throat like all the rest. He had been murdering drifters and hitchhikers for decades, apparently, chopping up their bodies and stashing the parts in the Taco Bell freezer. They found over 40 different DNA profiles down there. Greg admitted proudly to each and every one. As they dragged him away into the night, his deranged laughter still echoed through the parking lot. I quit my job at Taco Bell immediately. I was relieved Greg was finally caught, but I couldn't shake the chilling thought that he really would find me again one day. His threat lingered in my mind, haunting my dreams at night. I decided to move out of state for college instead, wanting to get as far away from Greg as possible. But sometimes I still see his gaunt face grinning back at me in crowds and hear his eerie laugh on the wind. No matter how far I run, I don't think I'll ever truly escape. Working the closing shift at Taco Bell had always given me the creeps. Being there alone late at night, cleaning up while the empty parking lot and darkened streets were so still. It created an eerie atmosphere, but I never imagined just how terrifying that restaurant could be after hours, until the night I realized I was being stalked there. It started out like any other closing shift. It was a Thursday night around 10 p.m. Things had been slow, so I went ahead and locked the front doors, even though we were still technically open for another hour. I just wanted to get a head start on cleaning things up and closing out the registers. As I swept the lobby, I glance up and notice a man standing outside the locked front doors. He was tall and skinny, wearing a black hoodie with the hood pulled up over his head. Something about him gave me an uneasy feeling. Our eyes met for a brief moment before I quickly looked away. When I glanced back up a few minutes later, the man was gone. I tried to shrug it off as nothing, even though I knew I had locked that door. I was probably just being paranoid. I brought the registers into the back office to count down. As I sat there tallying up the money, the sound of footsteps outside the office doorway made me jump. I looked up, expecting to see my coworker, but no one was there. I shook my head, laughing at myself for being so jumpy. After finishing the registers, I did a quick walkthrough to lock up the back doors. As I went to lock the rear entrance by the dumpster, a shadow passed by the edge of my vision. I whipped around, but again, no one was there. An uneasy feeling started to build in the pit of my stomach. Finally, it was time to arm the security system and get out of there. As I walked through the dark lobby, the sensor lights clicked on, triggered by movement. I froze. Someone else was in here with me, heart pounding. I scanned the shadowy interior, but saw nothing. I moved slowly toward the front doors, clutching my keys tightly in my fist. As I entered the unlock code with a shaky hand, a loud bang came from close behind me, making me scream. I whipped around, eyes darting wildly, ready to fight. But the lobby was empty. Hands trembling, I finally got the door unlocked and burst out into the night, gasping for air. The parking lot was deserted, except for my car. Nearly hyperventilating, I jumped inside and sped out of the parking lot, checking my rearview mirror compulsively. No one followed me, but I knew with absolute certainty now, someone had been in there with me, stalking me. Over the next week, I dreaded going back to close alone. But each night, nothing strange happened. No signs of an intruder, no creepy stalker. I started to feel ridiculous about that night. Maybe it was just my imagination running wild. But then, the following Thursday, I was closing again, tensely doing my usual routine. As I finished counting the registers in the office, movement outside the door made me freeze. The hint of a silhouette passed by. I sat petrified, listening intently. No more movement, no sounds. I forced myself to get up and check the lobby. I didn't see anyone, but I couldn't escape the prickly feeling on the back of my neck that told me I wasn't alone. I wanted desperately to run, but I still had to set the alarm and lock up. Taking a deep breath, I hurried towards the front doors, wanting to get this over with. But as I entered the code with trembling fingers, that horrifying bang sounded again, even closer this time. I screamed and hit the wrong buttons, panicking as the system beeped an error. Frantically punching codes, I kept imagining a dark figure approaching me from behind. Finally, the light turned green, and I heard the click indicating armed. I turned to run and came face to face with the hooded stalker himself. He reached for me, mouth twisted into a sick grin. Adrenaline exploded through me and I slammed my keys directly into his face. He howled in pain, hands flying up to his eyes. I sprinted outside into the safety of the night. The next day, I quit. As terrifying as it was being stalked by that hooded psychopath, nothing could make me go back to close there alone. I realized that empty Taco Bell after dark was the perfect place for a predator to hunt, and I refused to be anyone's prey ever again. The memories still paralyze me years later, and I've never eaten at Taco Bell since.